Why is it that we are living in the most convenient era in history, yet the human soul is weaker and more unsteady than ever before? We often mistakenly believe that freedom means doing whatever we like, indulging our emotions and running away from difficulties. But the brutal truth is that is a form of comfortable slavery. Slavery to laziness, to fear, and to trivial desires. The ancient samurai understood a truth that modern people have forgotten. Discipline is not punishment, but the highest form of self-respect. Today's video is not about hollow advice on motivation. We will journey together through 7 levels of self-control, from mastering desire and facing suffering to finding stillness amidst a world that is too noisy. If you are feeling lost or exhausted, brew a cup of tea. Sit down and let these thoughts permeate you. The journey to reclaim your own inner strength. I have compiled 30 quotes to highlight today's theme, the samurai code that modern society has forgotten, that I wish to convey to you. And I have divided these quotes into 7 groups with different themes for your convenience, so that we may together contemplate the timeless values of these sayings. And now let us go through today's 7 thematic groups. I wish to begin with a truth that is not easy to hear, yet the longer I live, the more I trust in its validity. The majority of human suffering stems not from circumstance, but from our inability to master ourselves. We often believe our misery arises from a lack of money, luck, opportunity, or understanding from others. But if I am truly honest with myself, there have been many times I collapsed not because life was too harsh, but because I lacked the discipline to stand firm when life began to test me. That is why the first group of these philosophical reflections speaks of self-control and discipline. It is not because the samurai or the Stoics loved severity, but because they understood one thing very clearly. If one cannot master oneself, then no matter how favorable the circumstances, one will eventually destroy oneself. The first saying lays the foundation for all that follows. The samurai knew that freedom is not found in doing whatever one desires, but in mastering desire itself. When I was young, I used to think freedom meant doing whatever I wanted, resting when I wanted, quitting when I wanted, indulging my emotions when I wanted. But the more I live, the more I realize that is a very subtle form of slavery. Slavery to fleeting emotions, to laziness, to fear, to short-term desires with long-term consequences. The samurai understood that if every day is lived according to emotion, life will be led astray like a rudderless boat. True freedom comes not from the absence of limits, but from being strong enough to set limits for yourself. Only when you can say no to immediate desires do you earn the right to say yes to your future. I have seen many people smarter and more talented than I am fall because they could not control themselves. And I was once the same. Going a step deeper, the samurai did not view discipline as a penalty. The samurai understood that discipline is not punishment, but the highest form of self-respect. This sentence silenced me for a long time when I first read it. We often think of discipline as coercion, as sacrifice, as doing what we dislike. But if we shift our perspective, discipline is actually a way of telling ourselves that we deserve a life better than what fleeting emotions can offer. When I started waking up early, even when I didn't want to, working, even without motivation, refusing things that made me weak, I no longer felt I was torturing myself. I felt I was respecting myself. Discipline did not diminish me, it made me stand taller. And to those suffering in life, I want to say, you do not need more motivation. You need more self-respect. Self-control is a battle, and the samurai understood this well. The samurai believed that controlling oneself was a greater victory than defeating any external enemy. I used to think victory meant surpassing others, competing with the world, proving my worth. But after losing to myself so many times, I realized the most dangerous enemy is not out there but within me, when I am weak, when I procrastinate, when I make excuses. There are days when no one opposes you. No one blocks your path, and yet you are the only one dragging yourself down. If you can win that day, then you are a true warrior. No medals are needed, no recognition is required. You only need to know that you did not betray yourself. What makes me respect the samurai and Stoic philosophers is that they did not wait for inspiration. The samurai trained every day, not because motivation was present, but because duty remained. This is crucial for those waiting for the day they feel motivated to begin. I waited like that for a long time, and the result was that I went nowhere. Motivation is fickle. Duty is not. When you do what must be done even when you do not want to, you build a fortitude that no one can take away from you. I survived very dark periods in my life not through hope, but through habit. The habit of getting up, the habit of working, the habit of not giving up. And I believe if you are exhausted, do not ask if you have motivation. Ask yourself, what is my duty today? One of the most dangerous enemies of modern man is haste. The samurai knew that impatience is a form of weakness disguised as urgency. We always feel we must be fast, must have immediate results, must succeed early. But haste causes us to make poor decisions, abandon the right path, and trade the long term for the immediate. I used to be very hasty. Hasty to succeed, hasty to prove myself, hasty to escape difficulties. And each time I paid the price. The samurai taught me that slowness is not weakness, but being steady enough not to be swept away by pressure. If you are feeling lost, it is very likely you do not need to run faster, but need to stand firmer. Accompanying patience is the attitude of not seeking shortcuts. The samurai did not seek shortcuts, knowing that true mastery tolerates no impatience. I understand the feeling of wanting an easier, faster path. But every shortcut takes something from you, usually the foundation. When you skip the process, you also skip the growth. The truly strong people I have met all walk the long path. They are slow, they are quiet, they are not flashy, but they stand firm when others fall. If you are tired because you do not yet see results, I want to say, perhaps you are already on the right path. You just need a little more patience. The samurai did not just train the body, they trained the mind. He sharpened his mind with the same care he sharpened his blade. I love this image. A sharp sword in the hands of a blind man causes only danger. The mind, if untrained, will become your own enemy, full of anxiety, doubt, and self-blame. I learned to sharpen my mind by observing my thoughts, not immediately believing every fear that appears in my head. I learned to be silent, to read, to reflect. When the mind is sharper, I no longer panic before difficulties as I once did. And that is a very quiet strength. Finally, all these things converge on a single foundation. The samurai knew that self-control is the foundation upon which all other virtues stand. Without self-control, all other virtues are merely beautiful ideas. Without self-control, courage becomes recklessness. Kindness becomes weakness, and freedom becomes chaos. If you are at rock bottom, tired, or lost, I do not advise you to change your entire life immediately. I only advise you to start with one small thing. Control one action, one habit, one decision each day. From there, you will rebuild yourself bit by bit. And that is the samurai spirit that I believe modern society has forgotten. Yet human beings always need, especially in our weakest moments. If the first group spoke of self-mastery, this second group goes a step further. It asks a much harder question. When no one is watching, when there is no reward, when there is no praise, how will you live? Honor is not something to show off. It is something you carry in silence, and only you know if you are betraying it or not. The first saying of this group opens up the true nature of honor. Honor was never something to be claimed with words. It was proven silently through consistent action. I have met many people who speak very well about morality, about principles, about life values. But when faced with a difficult choice, they choose the easier path for themselves. That was when I understood honor needs no declaration. A person of honor does not need to speak of it because it is already present in every small action repeated every day. Honor does not lie in grand moments, but in very small things. The way you keep a promise even when no one checks. The way you do not lie even if you could get away with it. The way you do not shift blame even when there is a reason to do so. I realize that if a person lives long enough with such actions, they will possess a very different kind of calmness. No need to prove, no need to explain. Just knowing that one is not living wrongly. Honor is tied to one's word. To the samurai, a man's word carried the same weight as his life. This sentence makes me think a lot about the era we are living in. Words have become cheap. Promising is easy, forgetting is also easy. People speak just to get by, speak to get things done in the moment, speak without thinking of long-term consequences. But the samurai were not like that. To them, a spoken word is a commitment that exists in parallel with one's life. When you treat your word lightly, you are also treating yourself lightly. I have made promises and failed to keep them. And each time I felt myself weaken a little. Not because others blamed me, but because I knew I had not kept what I said. If you are feeling lost, lacking confidence, try looking back at the relationship between you and your own word. Do you keep your word to yourself? Do you do what you say you will do? Self-respect begins there. The samurai understood that living without principles can be very comfortable, but that comfort will leave a very large void. The samurai code reminds us that a life without principles may feel easy, but it will never feel whole. I have chosen easy many times. Easy means no thinking, no facing internal conflict, no enduring pressure. But the price to pay is a feeling of emptiness, a feeling of living without truly being oneself. A principled life is not always joyful. It has very heavy days, but it gives you something the easy path never can. That is the feeling of wholeness. When you lie down at the end of the day and know that although tired, although defeated, you did not betray what you believe is right. This relates directly to how we measure our self-worth. He did not measure his worth by praise, but by whether he acted in accordance with his principles. When I was young, I needed recognition very much. A compliment could make me happy all day. A criticism could make me lose sleep. But living like that is very exhausting. You hand over the right to value your life to others. The samurai did not. Their value did not lie in the eyes of outsiders, but in the alignment between action and internal principles. When I started living this way, I worried much less. Not because I no longer needed anyone, but because I had an anchor inside. If today no one acknowledges me, but I know I lived correctly, that is enough to stand tall. The next sentence is one I consider harsh, but very true. He did not demand fairness from life. He demanded integrity from himself. Many people suffer because they constantly ask why life is unfair. I used to ask that too. But the more I asked, the more helpless I felt. Because life has no obligation to be fair to me. The samurai did not condition living decently on the fairness of circumstances. They did not say, if life is good to me, I will live right. They said, no matter what life is like, I must still maintain my integrity. When you accept that you take back control, you are no longer a victim of circumstance, but the one responsible for how you exist within that circumstance. And finally, all these things lead to a conclusion that is very quiet, but very strong. The forgotten samurai code reminds us that greatness begins with how we govern ourselves. The greatness the samurai spoke of is not fame, not status. It is the ability to govern oneself. Govern emotions, govern greed, govern fear, govern laziness. I believe many people are tired not because they are weak, but because they have lived too long without a clear internal order. When you set principles and live by them, your life may not be easier, but it will be clearer. And that clarity brings strength. If you are in a phase of being lost, I do not advise you to find great meaning immediately. I only advise you to start with a small principle. One thing you decide you will no longer compromise on. Keeping that you will feel you are no longer drifting as before. Honor does not make life lighter, but it makes a human stand straighter when burdens appear. And in the darkest moments of a human life, standing straight is already a victory. When speaking of duty and responsibility, many in modern society immediately feel a sense of heaviness. We have become accustomed to viewing freedom as the escape from responsibility and happiness as being unbound. I used to think so too. I used to believe that the fewer responsibilities I had, the lighter my heart would be. But the reality of life has taught me the opposite. Nothing makes a human being feel more empty and lost than not knowing what they are shouldering. The samurai and Stoic philosophers viewed duty not as a shackle, but as a pillar to stand tall amidst life. The first saying of this group touches very deeply on my life experience. He accepted responsibility fully knowing that excuses weaken the soul before they weaken results. I used to use many reasons to explain my failures. Circumstances, other people, timing, luck. Each reason sounded very logical, but after each time I felt myself shrink a little, weaken a little. The danger of blaming does not lie in worsening the result, but in that it deprives your soul of its weight. When you always have an excuse, you no longer have a reason to change. The samurai understood that taking full responsibility is a courageous act. It hurts, but it returns control to you. When I stopped asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and started asking, "What is my part in this?" I no longer saw myself as a victim. I became someone capable of action. I want to say this to those who are struggling. Taking responsibility does not mean self-torment or self-hatred. It is simply acknowledging that no matter how bad the circumstances, you still hold a part of the right to decide your reaction. And as long as you hold that right, you are by no means helpless. From responsibility, the samurai spoke of loyalty, but not in the way we usually think. He understood that loyalty begins with loyalty to one's own values. This sentence is very important, especially in a society where people easily lose themselves to please others. I was once loyal to the expectations of my family, of society, of the images others wanted me to become, yet I betrayed my own values. And the price paid was chronic exhaustion. The samurai were not blindly loyal. They were loyal to principles that had been carefully contemplated. When you are not loyal to your values, you will always live in a state of internal conflict. You do one thing, but in your heart, you know it is wrong for you. You say one thing, but do not believe in it. That contradiction erodes a human being faster than any external difficulty. I learned that being loyal to values is not always easy. Sometimes it makes you misunderstood, isolated, or disadvantaged in the immediate moment. But in the long run, it brings you something that no recognition can replace: the peace when looking straight at yourself. If you are confused and do not know which way to go, I advise you not to ask others first. Ask yourself what is non-negotiable for you. That is where loyalty should begin. The last sentence in this group speaks of how the samurai viewed time and life. The samurai measured time not by pleasure, but by growth and contribution. This is a very different perspective from the modern rhythm of life where everything is measured by the feeling of comfort. I do not deny joy or relaxation, but if life revolves only around seeking pleasure, one will sooner or later feel empty. The periods when I felt my life was most meaningful were not when I was happiest, but when I was striving, learning, and contributing something, however small. The samurai understood that joy is temporary while growth remains. When you look back on your life after many years, you will not remember all the times you had fun, but you will remember very clearly the periods you overcame yourself. If you are feeling that life is meaningless, perhaps you do not lack joy, but lack the feeling that you are growing and being useful. Try asking yourself each day not, "Was I happy today?" but "What did I learn today? Who did I help? How much did I advance?" These questions do not bring strong emotions immediately, but they build a life of weight. When I look back at this group 3, I see a very clear message. Duty is not something that takes away freedom, but something that gives freedom a shape. Responsibility does not make a person heavy, it makes a person steady. And loyalty, if it starts from your own values, will help you not get lost amidst the noise of the world. To those who are unsteady, I want to say that you do not need to find the entire meaning of life right now. Just find one thing worth being responsible for, one value to be loyal to, and one thing that makes you more mature than yesterday. From there, you will gradually stand firm, just as the samurai stood firm amidst the upheavals of their time. There is a very common misunderstanding in modern society. We often confuse strength with aggression, and true mettle with intense reaction. I used to think that being strong meant telling others I was not afraid, responding immediately when insulted, and proving I was not weak. But the longer I live, the more I realize that many behaviors which appear strong actually stem from insecurity and a lack of control. The samurai viewed strength in a completely different way. Strength to the samurai was not loud or aggressive, but calm, precise, and controlled. When reading this sentence, I suddenly realized that the people I admired most in my life all shared one common trait. They did not rush to react. They did not need to raise their voices to be heard. Their presence was steady enough for others to adjust themselves. That kind of strength does not come from muscle or status, but from the ability to maintain composure when everything around is in chaos. When you are calm, you see more clearly. When you control your emotions, you are not led by them. And when you are not driven by emotion, you begin to truly master your life. I used to let anger ruin important relationships. I used to say words I could not take back just to relieve my emotions in the moment. And each time the price paid was always much higher than the brief, fleeting satisfaction I felt initially. The samurai taught me that emotions are not bad, but letting emotions take the wheel is very dangerous. Strength is also most clearly shown in how a person faces winning and losing. He remained humble in victory and composed in defeat, for both were temporary states. This sentence reminds me of the periods when I was complacent because everything was favorable, and desperate when everything collapsed. Both states threw me off balance. The samurai understood that victory does not say who you are, and neither does defeat. They are merely moments on a long path. If you win and become arrogant, you will be blinded. If you lose and crumble, you will have no strength left to stand up. Maintaining composure in both states is a very rare form of strength, and one that is much needed in an ever-changing world. I have learned that if a success makes me look down on others, that success is weakening me. And if a failure makes me hate myself, that failure is taking away my most precious asset. Composure helps me not to let any result define my entire being. Another expression of strength that the samurai cherished is silence. He understood that silence, when chosen wisely, speaks louder than unnecessary words. In an era where everyone wants to speak, wants to show off, wants to rebut, silence becomes a very difficult act and therefore very powerful. I no longer try to win every argument. I no longer feel the need to explain myself to everyone. Not because I have nothing to say, but because I understand that speaking does not always bring value. There are times when silence helps me keep my dignity, keep my energy, and keep clarity in my mind. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is a choice. It is when you are steady enough not to be dragged into meaningless conflicts. To those who are exhausted from constantly reacting to the world, I want to say you do not need to answer everything. You only need to answer what is worthy. Life does not stand still, and change is inevitable. The samurai did not fight against this. The samurai accepted change calmly, knowing resistance only multiplies suffering. I used to resist many changes in my life. I clung to what was old, to relationships that no longer fit, to versions of myself that had expired. And the more I resisted, the more I hurt. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is looking straight at reality without deceiving oneself. When I stopped asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and started asking, "What will I do next?" I felt lighter. Not because the pain disappeared, but because I was no longer multiplying it with futile resistance. Composure in the face of change helps me save energy for what is more important: action. The world will continue to fluctuate whether I worry or not. The only thing I can control is how I react. And that is where true strength lies. Looking back at this entire group, I realized that the samurai did not seek to eliminate emotion, but learn to live with it without being dominated by it. Their strength lay not in never falling, but in not letting emotions drag them too far from their values. If you are in a phase of instability, easily angered, easily despairing, easily hurt, I do not advise you to become tough immediately. I only advise you to practice stopping before reacting. A deep breath, a moment of silence, a decision not to speak words you will regret. From those very small things, composure will gradually form. And when you possess it, you will realize that you are much stronger than you ever thought. There was a period in my life when I feared suffering. I avoided it by any means possible. I sought busyness so I wouldn't have to face sadness, sought entertainment to forget the feeling of emptiness, and sought comforting words so I wouldn't have to look straight at the truth that there are things in life that are irreparable, irreversible, and cannot be made okay in the way I wanted. But the more I ran, the more tired I became. And the more tired I became, the more I realized something. The samurai and Stoic philosophers understood very early on. Suffering does not disappear just because we do not look at it. It only becomes more distorted, heavier, and more dangerous when repressed. The first philosophical saying of this group made me pause for a long time. He prepared for death not because he loved dying, but because it taught him how to live without fear. We often avoid speaking of death as if mentioning it would bring it closer. But the samurai were the opposite. They looked straight at death every day. Not to be pessimistic, but to live correctly. When I first truly realized that I would die, not as a vague concept, but as a certain truth, the way I viewed life changed. Small things suddenly lost their power. Social fears, the fear of judgment, the fear of failure became lighter. Because if human life is finite, then living in fear is a cruel waste. Preparing for death in the samurai sense is not waiting to die, but clearing out the things that make us dare not live. When you accept that everything can be lost, you stop clinging. And only when you stop clinging are you truly free. Suffering is something no one wants, but something no one avoids. The issue is not whether there is suffering or not, but how we treat it. The samurai accepted suffering as a teacher, not as an enemy to be avoided. I used to view suffering as a mistake of life, as a sign that I had lived wrongly. But the more I mature, the more I see that suffering does not come to punish, but to teach. Every time I hurt, I learned something about my limits, about the illusions I once believed, about the things I need to let go of. Suffering peels away the artificial layers, forcing us to face our true selves. It is not gentle, but it is honest. And in a world full of falsehoods, honesty, even if painful, is still a gift. I am not saying we must love suffering. The samurai did not love it either, but they did not run from it. They stood there, endured, observed, and learned. And that very attitude turns suffering from an enemy into a teacher. If you are in a very difficult phase, I do not dare say everything will be fine. But I am certain of one thing: if you do not turn your back on this pain, it will not be meaningless. The awareness of impermanence runs throughout samurai and Stoic thought. He lived each day with the awareness that life is fragile and therefore sacred. We often live as if we have a lot of time left. We procrastinate living, truly procrastinate saying what needs to be said, procrastinate doing meaningful things. Then one day, a tragedy strikes. We realize time was never something we owned. When I truly understood that life is fragile, I began to live more slowly. Not slow due to laziness, but slow to feel. I cherish quiet mornings, more honest conversations, more in ordinary moments that are no longer taken for granted. Impermanence does not make life meaningless. It makes life precious. The samurai did not live in the illusion that tomorrow will definitely come. Therefore, they lived fully in today, not in the sense of excessive indulgence, but living true to what they believed, because they knew that each passing day is a day that will not return. I think many of us suffer not because the suffering is too great, but because we do not understand it, do not accept it, and do not place it in the correct position of a human life. Suffering is a part of living. Death is the price paid for existing. Impermanence is the foundation of every experience. When you accept these three things, you do not become cold or pessimistic. You become lucid. And in that lucidity, you begin to live with more gratitude, more courage, and less fear. The samurai were not people who did not know pain. They were people who did not let pain decide how they lived. And I believe that in a modern society where humans are increasingly weak before adversity, this spirit is not only memorable but also extremely necessary. I realize that after discipline and principles, what makes people collapse most is not a lack of ability, but the lack of feeling that one is living for something greater than personal comfort. That is why the next group speaks of duty, responsibility, and loyalty. He accepted responsibility fully, knowing that excuses weaken the soul before they weaken results. This saying used to annoy me because it left me nowhere to hide. I was once very good at explaining why I was tired, why circumstances were hard, why others didn't understand why I couldn't do better yet. Those explanations sounded very logical, very humane. But they did something dangerous. They accustomed me to escaping responsibility. The samurai understood that every time you make an excuse, you not only delay the result, you soften your own will. Responsibility is not always fair, but it matures a human being. When I stopped explaining and started taking responsibility even in situations I did not entirely cause, I felt heavier, but also steadier. If you are feeling your life is in chaos, try something very simple, but very hard. Stop blaming even fate. Accompanying responsibility is the concept of loyalty, but not blind loyalty. He understood that loyalty begins with loyalty to one's own values. I lived through conflicting periods, saying one thing but doing another to please others or out of fear of loss. But each time I did so, I lost respect for myself. The samurai did not betray their values in exchange for temporary convenience. Loyalty to values does not make your life easier, but it helps you live with integrity. And there are days when the only thing keeping me standing is not hope, but the knowledge that I have not betrayed what I believe is right. Finally, the samurai measured life by a very different yardstick. The samurai measured time not by pleasure, but by growth and contribution. Modern society teaches us to enjoy, consume, and seek pleasure. But when I look back at the most meaningful periods of my life, they were rarely the comfortable ones. They were the times I grew, took responsibility, and was useful to someone other than myself. If you are feeling empty, it is very likely you do not lack joy but meaning. And meaning often comes when you shoulder a part of life's responsibility. From responsibility, I want to move to strength, but not the strength people usually think of. Strength to the samurai was not loud or aggressive, but calm, precise, and controlled. I used to think being strong meant reacting fast, speaking loudly, winning arguments. But the older I get, the more I realize the strongest person is often the one who reacts the least. Calmness is not indifference. It is the result of self-control. When you are not dragged away by emotion, you see more clearly and decide better. I have avoided many mistakes simply by not reacting immediately. The samurai taught me another very important thing. He remained humble in victory and composed in defeat, for both were temporary states. When winning, do not be arrogant. When losing, do not despair. Neither lasts. I used to destroy myself after failure because I thought it defined me. And I also almost lost myself in success because I thought it would stay forever. Emotional balance does not make you weak. It helps you survive longer. Calmness is also shown through silence. He understood that silence, when chosen wisely, speaks louder than unnecessary words. I learned that not everything needs a response and not every attack needs a retort. There are times when silence is the way to preserve dignity. And when life changed, the samurai did not resist it with panic. The samurai accepted change calmly, knowing resistance only multiplies suffering. I suffered a lot, trying to cling to things that had changed. But when I learned acceptance, the pain did not vanish immediately, but it no longer controlled me. Going deeper, we must speak of suffering and death, things modern society avoids. He prepared for death not because he loved dying, but because it taught him how to live without fear. When I faced the fragility of life, small things suddenly lost their power. I feared loss. Less feared judgment, less feared failure less. The samurai did not seek suffering, but they did not run from it. The samurai accepted suffering as a teacher, not as an enemy to be avoided. I do not dare say suffering is good, but I dare say it can make you deeper if you do not let it make you bitter. The awareness of impermanence makes life sacred. He lived each day with the awareness that life is fragile and therefore sacred. When you know that nothing is guaranteed, you live more slowly, more kindly, and are more present. Finally, the samurai chose a very quiet path. The samurai lived as if every action were a reflection of his inner character. They did not live to perform, they lived to be right. The samurai chose simplicity, knowing that excess dulls both mind and spirit. I used to think more was better, but the more I stripped away, the clearer I saw who I was. And they did not fear solitude. He did not fear loneliness, for it was in solitude that clarity was forged. There are answers that only come when you are quiet enough to hear yourself. If you have walked with me this far, I believe you are no longer looking for hollow encouragement. You are looking for a steadier way to live. And that is exactly what the samurai and Stoic philosophy left for us. Not the strength to overwhelm life, but the strength not to collapse before it. There is something I observe very clearly when looking at modern society. We live in an age of unprecedented convenience, yet human beings are more insecure than ever before. We have many choices, many tools, many things for entertainment, but we lack something very fundamental, a sense of internal steadiness. The samurai, were they alive in this era, would likely see us as both strong and weak. Strong in technology, but weak in spirit. The first saying of this group strikes straight at that issue. While modern society worships comfort, the samurai trained himself to remain steady in discomfort. I do not think the samurai hated comfort. They simply understood that if a human being is only used to living in ease, then when difficulty appears, that person will collapse very quickly. I have seen this in myself and in many people around me. We are used to everything being fast, convenient, and causing no discomfort. Just a little pressure, a little inconvenience, a little delay, and we become frustrated, impatient, doubt ourselves, and doubt life. The samurai were the opposite. They trained in discomfort so that when adversity arrived, it would no longer be a shock. If you are facing difficulties, I am not saying you must love suffering. I just want you to understand that the feeling of discomfort is not always a sign that you are on the wrong path. Sometimes it is a sign that you are growing. Modern society teaches us to avoid discomfort, while the samurai teach us to stand firm within it. Going deeper, society today is obsessed with happiness. Everyone asks how to be happier, lighter, more positive. But the samurai asked a different question. The samurai did not chase happiness. He cultivated meaning through duty and restraint. I used to chase happiness a great deal. I thought that if I felt happy, everything would be fine. But happiness is something very fragile. It comes and goes depending on circumstances, on others, on emotions. Meaning is different. Meaning does not require you to be happy all the time. Meaning allows you to endure, allows you to continue, even when tired. When I started living based on responsibility, on things I knew were right rather than fleeting emotions, I was not necessarily happier every day, but I was much steadier. The samurai understood that a human life does not need to be comfortable all the time, but it needs a reason to keep walking. Many people are suffering not because they lack joy, but because they do not see meaning in what they do. If you are in that state, perhaps the question is not how to be happier, but what am I living for? What responsibility am I shouldering, and do I have enough courage to live true to it? The last sentence of this group, and also one of the sentences that makes me think the most, speaks of recognition. In a world obsessed with being seen, the samurai valued being worthy even when unseen. We are living in an era where human value is often measured by views, likes, and attention. If no one sees, if no one praises, we begin to doubt our own worth. The samurai lived in a completely different value system. They cared about whether they were worthy, not whether they were seen. This is extremely important for those who are striving silently, living decently, making efforts every day but receiving no acknowledgement. I want to say to you, if you are in that situation, that being unseen does not mean being worthless. Many of the most important things in life happen in silence. Your character, your discipline, your honesty do not need an audience. The samurai understood that if one lives only to be seen, one will lose oneself very quickly. When I look back at modern society through the lens of the samurai, I do not see a confrontation but a reminder. We do not need to go back to living like ancient warriors, but we very much need to reclaim the self-mastery, the meaning, and the intrinsic value that they once considered a vital foundation. If you are feeling lost in a world that is too noisy, too fast, too full of comparison, then perhaps the problem lies not in you not being good enough, but in you using the wrong yardstick. The samurai did not measure their lives by attention, but by worthiness. And that may be the thing this era needs to remember most. My dear friends, the philosophy of the samurai is not meant to turn back the clock so we live like warriors of a bygone era, but to help us build a solid fortress within our souls amidst these turbulent times of peace. Do not try to change your entire life overnight. That is impossible. Start with the smallest things. The moment this video ends, an honest word, a decision not to procrastinate, or simply a minute of silence to look deeply into yourself. Remember, strength is not the ability to crush life, but the ability to stand firm so as not to collapse before it. Thank you for dedicating your precious time to contemplate these thoughts with me. If you feel your soul needs a resting place, a space to share profound perspectives on philosophy and life, please press the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That will be the way for us to continue walking together on the path of seeking stillness and growth. See you in the next videos. Be peaceful and steadfast.